Hello, I'm Emily Liska, and this is the Jacksonville History Show. This is the show that analyzes and celebrates Jacksonville and North Florida's history. And there's probably no other era in Jacksonville history more celebrated, more talked about than the silent film industry and their arrival in Jacksonville and their very abrupt departure. But there was one studio that lingered just a little longer, had a little longer life than the rest, and that was Richard Norman's studio, Norman Studio. And here to talk about it, I have Rita Reagan and also Anthony Hodge, and they're active with Norman Studios Silent Film Museum, Inc., and they often call themselves Friends of Norman Studios, and indeed they are, because what the two of you have done and a bevy of Jacksonville citizens is really monumental in attempting to save this legacy that we have here in Jacksonville, this wonderful silent film facility that still exists, although altered many times. And Rita, I want you to walk us through, if you would, just some of the activities to save this wonderful piece of Jacksonville history, the Norman Studios property.
Well, right now we have the culmination of about 18 or 19 years of work. It all started in 1993, and a group of people over in Arlington, Old Arlington Inc., formed a group to try to save, well, to help the neighborhood, to revitalize the neighborhood. And they discovered this property, the Norman Studios. At the time, it was a disastrous, derelict complex, but they researched it, and they said, this could be the engine to drive the revitalization of Arlington. So that began an odyssey of trying to save the property, and eventually they did convince. There was a wonderful exhibit at JU that I worked with in the '95, and eventually Lake Race bought the property for the city, and over a period of time, the exteriors were renovated, restored, but the interiors still have not been.
And Lake Gray was the city councilman for that Arlington district at the time, so they were able to save and stabilize it. But this, that's nothing. The story goes on and on. Well, it's something. It was a very big deal.
It's a saga, actually. But those things happened. We've worked with the property for years and years and years, but up until the last 3 years, the city has not quite known what they wanted to do. So it is a kind of a puzzlement that they just passed an ordinance that makes us the interim caretakers of the property. And that could be anywhere from 1 year to maybe 8 years, because the goal of the legislation is to turn the property over to the National Park Service. They've been interested in it, sort of. Now, why are they now majorly interested? Because of all the work that we've done for all these years.
And it's a fascinating facility and of national interest.
And they've realized that now that we've brought it this far, it will be easier to convince the Congress to accept the property and to do the rest of the work. Like I said, the interiors have to be done, and then any type of exhibits and so forth have to be created, etc. So it's a long haul still.
So part of this movement, you had to, not only did you at one point convince the city council to save this property years ago, perhaps when the city coffers were a little more flush than they are today. Once again, you
8 years ago.
That's right. Once again, you had to convince the city what a great idea this would be to turn the property over to the National Park Service. They just have a marvelous track record in handling these properties, and we have an image that I hope we can get on camera here on the tabletop. And a group of you from Norman Studios were, of course, at a council meeting. This is in front of the council chamber in City Hall, downtown Jacksonville. And tell us about this night, Rita, and what you accomplished.
Well, there's Anthony in partly playing Richard Norman. That's one of the things he does. He's our Renaissance man. He does many, many things. But one thing, he's an actor, and he is there impersonating Richard. And just some of the rest of us who are involved. And we are celebrating the fact that they had passed this bill. Now,
for the National Park Service to make it available to the Park Service.
And to make us the interim caretakers.
Perfect.
Now, beware of what you ask for, because now we have to have a program of things that we want to do. We have had many programs, but we will be somewhat limited in what we can do, number one, by money, and number two, by what the city will allow.
Of course. Now I want to turn to Anthony, because I want to find out more about Norman Studios, this fascinating man, Richard Norman, who, by the way, I found out you have actually played in a theater production. But let's talk about the studios, the history, Mr. Norman's history. Have at it.
Well, Richard Norman was born in Middleburg and later made his home in Jacksonville. He had his start in the film industry in terms of his career by traveling the country and making what he called town films, where he would go into small towns across the country and he would shoot the local people who lived there, film them in a story, and then make a production of it, put it in the theater, and then sell tickets for them to go see themselves on the big screen. So that
had to be exciting. Boy,
yeah.
He had a real business going there.
He had a really great business.
Yes.
He had it really fine-tuned to where he could go in. He had a set script that he would use. He would go in, shoot the story. He would have it edited and in the theaters within a couple of days to be able to show to the local people.
And wasn't he like one of the first people in history to have something known as stock footage?
Right,
and
exactly.
Tell about that.
So what he did with these films, he had filmed a spectacular train wreck, and that footage of the train wreck he would put in every film for every town where he would make these little films. Regardless if the town even had a train in it to begin with, he would still include that as part of the film because that was like the climactic end.
How exciting. So this man was quite the businessman in a very creative area. So let's talk about how he came to acquire the studio, and it was known as Eagle Studios at the time.
Correct,
and they sort of picked up Tucktail, left Jacksonville, Florida, for better digs out on the West Coast, as I recall. The rest of that story is Hollywood, California. And here he was with this wonderful silent film facility. And tell what he did while he was there. And,
Sure.
and we might show a few visuals. I think, we have some that we can show of what Mr. Norman did. They'll come up on the screen as you talk.
Sure. Well, I mean, primarily, he was shooting films across the country, but Jacksonville at the time in the early 20s was becoming the film central or the winter capital of filming in the country. So not only people were using Jacksonville to be able to use as a site location, a lot of studios were coming down from New York making home in Jacksonville. So early in the 20s, Richard decided to come home, so he bought the bankrupt Eagle Studios that you mentioned and made that into Norman Studios, where he started producing his own films.
Now,
And could I intercept here? One of the things that was interesting about it is that he had discovered race films, and so that's where he came home, and he never, again, did town films. He did race films from that point on. They were films for the black audiences. They starred all-black cast, and they were primarily played in black theaters. But, and that's what makes this facility so interesting to the National Park Service. They love this history of Jacksonville's film background and all the things that were done here, but it's Norman who...
Right.
Yeah, and that's right, Rita, and they just pulled this up. This is a early poster of one of his films. Go ahead, both of you talk about this a little. Do you want to start, Anthony?
So, yeah, this was the famous African-American rodeo star, Bill Pickett, and one of the films that he made was called The Bulldogger. The previous poster that was up there was The Flying Ace. The Flying Ace is the only film in its entirety. It's at the Library of Congress, but it's the only complete film that we know of that's in existence. We hope to be able to find some others like The Bulldogger, like The Green-Eyed Monster, which is one of his very first race films, where he portrayed black people in a very positive manner as opposed to the stereotypical roles they were portrayed in the movies in the early days.
Now, we just have a few minutes left, and in that time, I want to talk about what people can do to help, and also some of the events that you have very soon, events coming up, because you get audiences from all over Jacksonville. People love what you're doing. So talk about both of those things, how people can help and events they can attend.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I mean, the bottom line is we're a 501c, so we can accept, tax-deductible contributions.
You want money.
For our organization. We want money. We want to be able to, get the word out and expand more. We want to be able to have a facility on the property where we can, have tours, have people come in and share the experience from an educational perspective. How
do they find you?
Our website, normanstudios.org.
Okay.
We always post the events that we have coming up, like the one in 5 Points coming up on September 22nd, which is a Thursday night, where we're going to be showing some of Richard Norman's clips, along with some other films by Fatty Arbuckle and Buster Keaton. And we have 2 musicians from the University of Jacksonville performing there, Bob Moore and Tony Steve. And they're going to play music like they did when they showed silent films in their early days. So you have live music along with the silent films showing up on the screen.
Who could miss that? And I've actually had the benefit of seeing that before. It's just magnificent. Great fun.
Rita? 2 presentations coming up in Tallahassee at the Museum of History. They're having exhibits that fit, and so they're going to show the flying ace there. We entered this movie in a number of different festivals around the country, from New York to San Francisco to Miami. And then don't forget to talk about our documentary.
Oh yeah, exactly. So we have a documentary that's for sale on the website as well, and it's called Hollywood East. And it's pretty much about the history of the filmmaking industry in Jacksonville during that period of time.
And I think we actually have a little image of that perhaps in here.
I don't know if we do or not, but that's the CD.
And you can hold up the book always.
Oh,
so
yeah.
there's the CD, there's a book, and they can find these through your website.
Exactly.
And of course, this is in a lot of bookstores. Wonderful Hollywood East. If people want to know
bookstores,
details.
Amazon.com, but yeah.
Fascinating
and then our
story.
DVD is available from the website. So, this is how we continue to sell and to continue to tell the story of Norman Studios.
And you have a cadre of people who will come out and present programs to organizations and clubs. And
we're looking for more actors and more presenters as well,
and more volunteers.
Because we get a lot of requests, and sometimes we can't meet all of them.
We have 1 minute left.
Okay.
In that minute, what is it you'd like to say to the viewers? What do you want them to know about Richard Norman or Norman Studios or your group?
Come out to the website, normanstudios.org, sign up for our Facebook page so you get a listing of all the events, all the presentations that are being made, where the Hollywood East film is showing in the next film festivals, all the universities' presentations that we have coming up. So yeah,
and help us to convince our congressional delegation, and later we'll be taking a contingent to Washington to lobby to get this facility taken in. It joins to show the African American experience in North Florida. It joins in the Temple Preserve, American Beach, and Kingsley Plantation. So this is another experience for the historical experience for the black community as well.
Well, I want to congratulate all the friends of Norman Studios Film Museum. And it's just the work you've done is magnificent, and to think that you've taken this project and you will be promoting it in front of our nation's the Congress, U.S. Congress. We're so very proud of you in the history community here in Jacksonville, Florida. Thank you for all you do.
Thank you, Emily.